the African Union Envoy on Youth, Ms. Arria Chebbi, stationed in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Arria.
Thank you so much, Ambassador and President of the month of the Security Council, distinguished members of the United Nations Security Council, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by expressing my gratitude and the gratitude of African youth whom I represent to the Republic of South Africa for this invitation and for your leadership, your continuous leadership on the youth agenda. Mr. President, we have no shortage of policies. In fact, your esteemed council have adopted 3 resolutions on youth, peace and security, as well as the African Union Peace and Security Council adopted recently in June the Continental Framework on Youth, Peace and Security with 10-year implementation plan, which makes us the first continent to make such a milestone, which will really require a stronger collaboration among United Nations Security Council and African Union Peace and Security Council to ensure that we have synergies between these frameworks, especially in the development of national action plans under Africa's leadership. Excellencies, you have taken the responsibility and the commitment to harness the peace dividend. What we need now is to move from aspiration to implementation and from policies to mobilization for action. Now, with COVID-19 forcing us to rethink the notion of security, the definition of threat. What is a threat? Is it climate change? Is it terrorism? Or is it COVID-19? We answer some of these questions in the policy paper on Africa Youth Challenges, Agency and Recovery Roadmap on COVID-19 that my office released last month, showing that despite the current challenges, African youth have exhibited unprecedented leadership and resilience in civic action, in community awareness, in fighting misinformation, in using technology from Kenya to South Africa, from Tunisia to Niger, and many other countries. These have showing us that young people are committed to fight the pandemic, especially with the African Union efforts. We established the African Youth Front on Coronavirus, which has done a tremendous work in supporting Africa CDC continental response. The African Union also launched the Youth Silencing the Guns campaign in line with the theme of the year, galvanizing youth voices to silence the guns across the continent. And we have utilized every platform and tool available to engage young Africans. Through social media, we have reached over 48 million youth during the past 6 months. We engage youth in the creatives, music, and fashion industries, as the AU theme of 2021 is on arts, culture, and heritage. We engage young women by creating the first ever African Union feminist blog, Sauti, featuring the stories of peace building and resilience of 25 young women. And I'm sharing this because Your Excellency's innovative approaches and methods for youth engagement in peace and security agenda is imperative. Bringing millions of youth to the key frameworks of the Council is possible, but with new innovative ways, not old bureaucratic inefficient ways. Despite the disruption by COVID-19 outbreak, we have also taken this campaign to the grassroots. I recently visited South Sudan, where I witnessed over 1,000 guns voluntarily being handed over by young people in Rumbek, Lake State. The approach of voluntary disarmament through intergenerational dialogue with youth has proven to be more effective than forceful disarmament, which usually results in violence and potential rearmament. Therefore, implementing holistic disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration program with youth with an intergenerational approach is critical. Excellencies, I want to use today's briefing to present the policy report on youth silencing the guns intergenerational dialogues in line with today's theme. This report is the result of 6 regional dialogues convened with youth from North, South, East, West, Central, and Diaspora regions. 1,800 participated, including displaced and refugee youth, youth in rural areas, informal settlement, youth with disability, and young women, as well as civil society organizations, AU commissioners, regional economic communities, the United Nations partners, and member states. We can testify that, based on the 100 intergenerational dialogues we convened over the past 2 years, This approach works, and it helps enhance cooperation between different stakeholders. The sixth intergenerational dialogue resulted eventually in the African Youth Declaration on silencing the guns with 10 concrete recommendations. In the interest of time, I'd like to highlight 4 key relevant issues for our discussion today. First, why do we need intergenerational dialogue? Because the average age of African heads of state and government is 64, when the average age of the population is 20. The only way to bridge a 44 years generation gap is intergenerational co-leadership. Africa is considered the youngest population in the world, the youngest continent, with 65% of our population under 30. But conflict on the continent is aggravated by the lack of communication and collaboration between generations. Intergenerational co-leadership can be a powerful preventive approach to address current and emerging crises and conflict by creating a common ground to build trust from the community to the highest level of decision making. We urgently need intergenerational solidarity, generational healing, and generational accountability. Participation only with a seat at the table does not guarantee young people's voices are heard. But with co-leadership, in mediation, in negotiations, within missions, at the design and implementation of national action plans, then young people can find meaningful ways to co-lead and contribute to peace. 2, young people are urging you to silence youth unemployment. Job security emerged as top priority across all 6 regions of Africa during the dialogues. With the rapid urbanization, the biggest threat to our continent is mass unemployment. We need to end economic and climate change forced migration of youth from the continent, especially the impact on youth in the Sahel and Lake Chad region. That is why we need to incorporate human security to YPS agenda. We need to move from youth peace and security to youth peace and development, from a militarization focus to a humanized and dignity-centric focus. 3, young women are urging you to criminalize gender-based violence in all its forms, especially in conflict, in displacement, in humanitarian settings, including femicide, rape, harmful practices, trafficking, and other forms of sexual exploitation. Last month, I also visited Namibia and listened to the Shut It All Down youth movement, which has taken to the streets on peaceful protests to demand the end of gender-based violence. On 25th November, during International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women, I handed over to the UN and the AU the Africa Young Manifesto on Beijing Plus 25, where over 1,500 young Africans demand the end of gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is also a matter of peace and security. 4, and finally, the declaration urges for the protection of fundamental youth rights and freedoms. The freedom for protest, for internet, for speech, for civic space in Nigeria, in Cameroon, in Guinea, and across the continent. It is important in the 5-year anniversary of 2250 resolution that we are all reminded that protection of young people in compliance with international humanitarian and human rights law is one of its 5 pillars. Young Africans demand the protection of their rights and accountability during armed conflict, because young Africans do not produce, sell, or buy guns, and yet they pay the highest price, their lives and their livelihoods. As Mandela Kapere, a young Pan-African leader, sadly taken from us by COVID-19 this week, said, "We are a generation of paradox, the generation of the middle, a generation of the intersection between the past and the new, representing both the heroic struggles of the past and the hopeful lamenting for a better future." He was talking about the millennials and the responsibility of all of us to co-lead the future he hoped for. By our actions, we can honor his memory and all of those taken by COVID-19 in the most dignified way. I thank you.
I want to thank Ms. Arria Chebbi, the African Union Envoy on Youth. This live broadcast of Security Council Arria formula now crosses to Ramallah in Palestine, and I want to invite Mr. Ahmed Yassin, Palestinian Vision. Ahmed, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. Your Excellencies and dear fellow young people, I'm grateful to be invited to speak to the Security Council today. I do not claim to